Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to share today's deep dive with you all. We're going to unpack a truly fascinating 30-year philosophical reflection that actually uses the natural world to crack the code of long-term relationships. It's a remarkable piece of source material. It kind of perfectly blends nature, psychology, and this deeply personal family history into one incredible analysis. So let's jump right in.
Real quick, here's a roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the marriage experiment, then look at three distinct natural models: the grasshopper, the lion, and the dove. Finally, we'll wrap up with a 30-year reflection.
All right, starting with part 1, the marriage experiment.
Let's look at the foundational premise from our source text, which is basically viewing the institution of marriage as a living laboratory. The author poses this really fascinating concept. He asks us to look at a relationship as an experimental cell where two distinct and often totally polar forces attempt to build a shared space. We're talking about two completely different human beings here. From those early days of courtship all the way through the long passage of time, these two forces interact, and they constantly reshape their shared environment. And this inevitably leads to a massive pressing question. What are the actual chances that this delicate system can remain balanced? Is harmony something we have to actively choose, or are we just destined to struggle with these differences? Well, the text argues that maintaining this balance is entirely possible. But, and this is a big but, when that delicate equilibrium gets disturbed, something pretty dangerous happens. Small, totally unnoticed cracks begin to form. And if they're left unchecked, those cracks widen over time, ultimately leading to what the author calls an emotional big bang of separation. Now, what's absolutely crucial here is the blast radius. When this relationship cell breaks down, the explosion damages way more than just the two individuals involved. The fallout literally spreads to the kids, the extended families, and even the wider social environment.
Moving on to part 2, let's explore the grasshopper model.
To understand exactly how this vital balance is lost, the author suggests we look to nature. And this brings us to the first of 3 pretty extreme relationship models. In the natural world, specifically looking at insects like the praying mantis or certain grasshoppers, we see this really grim dynamic. After reproduction, the female literally consumes the male. Yeah. The striking part of this metaphor, though, is that the male, acting almost as if he knows his ultimate fate, enters the relationship anyway. He sacrifices absolutely everything.
So if we translate this to human terms, it represents a relationship dynamic that's actually, sadly, quite common. This is the couple where one partner gives endlessly, zero boundaries, and the other just receives. At first, this endless giving feels like an expression of deep love, but over time, it shifts into a habit, and eventually, it hardens into an expectation. One day, the giver wakes up and realizes their generosity is quietly turned into flat-out servitude. Meanwhile, the taker discovers that they now take this person completely for granted. They might even view the giver as weak. And the real tragedy here, neither partner actually intended to end up in this toxic loop. It's just this slow, gradual slide driven by a total lack of mutual awareness.
Okay, section 3, the lion model. Let's completely flip that power dynamic for a second and look at our next archetype. Out in the wild, the lion kingdom operates under a vastly different structure than our grasshopper friends. Here, the lioness carries almost all of the daily effort. She's the one hunting, working, caring for the cubs, the whole shebang. The lion, on the other hand, he gets to enjoy the status of an absolute, entitled ruler. He lounges around, reaping the benefits of her hard work, and honestly, he doesn't contribute equally to the daily maintenance of their lives at all.
When you apply this to human relationships, it reveals a very specific kind of imbalance. This is the partner who basically treats the other like property. Before commitment, there's this intense period of hunting. We're talking extreme courtship, showering the other person with gifts, massive romantic gestures, unwavering attention. But once the relationship is secured, a huge shift happens. The admiration just becomes routine. The effort turns into entitlement. The partner who was once treated like absolute royalty is now taken for granted, and they're expected to bear all the heavy burdens of life while the ruler just grows bored. And much like the grasshopper model, the lion model ultimately ends in emotional distance, quiet dissatisfaction, and just profound loneliness.
Which brings us to section 4, the dove model.
Since both of those previous models end in isolation in the total breakdown of that relationship cell we talked about, let's look at the ultimate solution provided in our source text. The dove represents a completely different possibility in nature. Among doves, you don't see dominance and submission. Instead, you see continuous courtship that lasts a lifetime. You see shared equal effort in building the nest and feeding the young. In this model, there are no masters, and there are absolutely no servants. It's just a true, balanced partnership. So, what does this mean for us? Well, there's this massive misconception out there that a harmonious partnership is just some automatic gift from heaven, you know? You either have it or you don't. But the reality is that the Dove model demands ongoing, continuous attention. The author actually compares this type of marriage to a delicate plant. If you don't water it regularly, it's going to slowly wither and dry up. It requires active communication, mutual respect, and a genuine desire to give so that neither partner ever takes the other for granted. Every single day, the relationship has to be rebuilt and renewed.
Putting these three archetypes side by side, it's wild how clearly you can see how the dynamic you fall into dictates the final outcome of your relationship experiment. I mean, think about it. The grasshopper's imbalance of giver versus taker leads straight to servitude. The lion's dynamic of ruler versus property, that leads to distance and boredom. But the dove, built on equal partnership, results in enduring strength, and not just for the couple, but as a real stabilizing force for their entire family and community.
Finally, Section 5, a 30-year reflection.
So where did these vivid, incredibly powerful metaphors actually come from? The backstory is so cool, spanning 3 entire decades. This framework wasn't written by some clinical psychologist for a textbook. It was originally penned back in the mid-1990s by a 48-year-old father named Yehuda. He was just trying to find a way to silently guide his teenage daughter, without, getting into those classic teenage arguments. So he just leave these thoughtful, short essays on the table for her to read. Fast forward to 2026, and a 79-year-old Yehuda is reflecting on these very same words. And to bring it all full circle, today, his son Meyer takes these written reflections and turns them into audio recordings for their family and friends. It's a literal, living, breathing, multi-generational archive.
What we're really looking at here is a fascinating dialogue across time. As Yehuda reviews his writings as a 79-year-old, he realizes that the grasshopper, the lion, and the dove aren't just clever little literary theories he made up for his daughter. They are profound, lived realities. With the benefit of a lifetime of perspective, he sees exactly how easily relationships can slip into imbalance if we aren't careful, and just how much constant, deliberate effort is required to actually live like the dove.
This brings us to the core philosophy of his entire reflection. His most powerful takeaway, after all these years, is this: love is not only an emotion, it is a daily choice. It's that active, conscious choice to truly see the other person. It's the choice to give without feeling like you're losing a piece of yourself, and the choice to maintain that incredibly delicate balance between your own independence and your togetherness. He also shares this beautiful realization about his own marriage. He notes that lasting balance in the laboratory of marriage doesn't come from being identical or coming from the exact same background. In fact, he points out that he and his wife came from totally different cultures and different families. The strength of their bond came from actively choosing to respect those differences. The laboratory succeeded not because the two polar forces were the exact same, but because they honored how different they were. And that leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought to chew on today. Yehuda's ultimate message to the next generation is that marriage isn't some fragile experiment doomed to fail, nor is it a quest to find a flawless human being. It's the journey of two imperfect people who choose to grow together. So ask yourself, as you navigate your own relationship experiments, are you searching for the perfect person, or are you choosing, every single day, to be the dove? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer today, and I'll catch you on the next one.